I mean, he had Tom bloodied up, and Tom didn't want to continue in the fight. So
that right there was Dana White speaking just a few short weeks before making what will almost certainly be remembered as the most controversial move of his entire career. Those 7 casual words would end up sparking a full-scale war between the UFC president and his reigning heavyweight king, a relationship that had already been hanging by a thread. What you're about to hear is the story behind one of the most explosive, messy, and frankly heartbreaking moments the heavyweight division has ever seen. Because just moments ago, the unthinkable became reality. Dana White has made a call that is sending shockwaves throughout the entire MMA world, and the incredible Tom Aspinall suddenly finds himself standing at the center of a firestorm that could define his legacy forever. The heavyweight belt, arguably the most coveted prize in all of combat sports, has been stripped from the man who waited longer, worked harder, and remained more patient than anyone else to finally claim it. To understand how we reached this brutal turning point, we've got to rewind the clock to October 25th, 2025. Fight night, Abu Dhabi, Etihad Arena. Aspinall was stepping in to make the very first defense of his undisputed UFC heavyweight championship, facing the former interim title holder, Cyril Gane. This was Aspinall's 19th professional fight, headlining the massive UFC 331 card. Over 18,000 fans filled that arena, ready for a masterclass between two of the most technically gifted heavyweights alive. This night was supposed to be Tom Aspinall's coronation, the moment he would finally silence every critic who ever questioned whether he deserved the throne without facing the legendary Jon Jones. He had been elevated to undisputed champion after Jones retired earlier that year, and Aspinall himself chose Gane as his first challenger. Gane entered as a clear underdog at plus 200, with Aspinall holding the heavy favorite tag. Everything about this matchup promised a showcase of elite striking, with Aspinall expected to build on his string of lightning-fast knockouts and add another highlight to his resume. Fans believed Gane was simply the next man to fall. As the opening round began, Aspinall marched forward, taking control with heavy leg kicks and a sharp jab. One of those kicks visibly wobbled Gane, but Gane fired back with clean combinations, tight right hands, stiff body shots, looking far sharper than many predicted. Neither man took any major damage, but Aspinall clearly owned the center of the cage. You could feel a chess match forming, both fighters reading each other, preparing to open up. The heavyweight division had been starving for a moment like this, and then it happened, the moment that changed everything. The moment that ultimately, and unfairly, cost Tom Aspinall his title at T435 of round 1. Just as Aspinall delivered another low kick, Gane extended a jab that accidentally jammed directly into both of Aspinall's eyes. A devastating, deep double eye poke. Aspinall dropped instantly, grabbing his face in absolute agony. Referee Jason Herzog halted the fight and called in the doctor. Aspinall reported severe pain, double vision, and couldn't see clearly at all. The doctor had no choice. The fight was waved off. The arena erupted in boos. An entire crowd robbed of the showdown they came to see. Minutes later, the official ruling was announced. No contest, accidental double eye poke. And just like that, in the span of a single tragic moment, everything Tom Aspinall had built vanished into confusion, controversy, and heartbreak.
Well, I actually got eye poked twice in the fight. First one wasn't too bad. He got warned for it. The second one, obviously, Cyril Gane tried to make my head a bowling ball with the double eye poke knuckle deep in both.
True gravity of what unfolded inside that cage cannot be overstated. This wasn't a minor poke or a routine foul that a fighter could simply blink through. Aspinall suffered a brutal, deep double eye poke, so severe that he had to be stretchered out of the arena and taken to the hospital immediately. It was the kind of scene no one ever expects to see involving the reigning heavyweight champion of the world. In the chaotic aftermath, a shaken and emotional Cyril Gane repeatedly apologized, stressing again and again that the foul was completely accidental. Because of that, the UFC issued no disciplinary action. But the incident instantly reignited long-standing debates across the MMA world about outdated glove designs and the urgent need for meaningful changes to prevent catastrophic injuries like this from ever happening again. However, what happened later at the post-fight press conference is what truly lit the fuse on the firestorm that followed. Dana White stepped up to the podium and delivered comments that stunned everyone in the room. With a tone that many felt was cold and dismissive, he brushed off the no contest as a major inconvenience for the UFC. Worse, he insisted that Aspinall had no real eye damage, implying that the stoppage was the result of Aspinall choosing not to continue rather than a legitimate medical emergency. In that single moment, White unintentionally created a false and damaging narrative, one that painted his own heavyweight champion as someone who voluntarily bowed out of the fight. And that narrative would become the driving force behind the explosive collapse of the relationship between Aspinall and the organization in the weeks that followed.
I mean, he had Tom bloodied up, and Tom didn't want to continue in the fight. So
those words struck like a...
That one statement from Dana White hit the MMA world like a lightning strike. The message behind it wasn't subtle, and the fallout was immediate. Tom Aspinall, the reigning heavyweight champion, a man who had waited nearly 18 months to finally defend his undisputed crown, was suddenly being portrayed as if he had simply folded under a little pressure. In a sport where grit is everything and fighters earn respect by pushing through pain most people can't imagine, Dana had essentially stood in front of the entire world and implied that Aspinall lacked the toughness expected of a champion. But the public had no idea, and Dana either didn't know or didn't bother to acknowledge just how severe Aspinall's injuries really were. The truth was far more alarming than anyone present at that press conference could have realized. On November 30th, 2025, Aspinall broke his silence. He uploaded his official medical documents to Instagram, finally giving fans and critics undeniable proof of what he had been dealing with. It was his direct response to the waves of backlash and to Dana's dismissive remarks. He wanted people to see exactly why fighting on was physically impossible. The diagnosis at the center of the report: bilateral traumatic Brown syndrome, a rare and serious condition caused by extreme damage to the superior oblique tendon trough complex in the eye. Cases like this are almost unheard of in MMA. They typically occur only in the most severe orbital injuries, and the fact that both of Aspinall's eyes were affected made the situation even more extraordinary. Brown syndrome drastically limits upward eye movement, causing agonizing misalignment and visual distortion. It doesn't just make fighting impossible, it makes ordinary tasks difficult. And that wasn't all. Imaging showed extensive orbital tissue damage, along with a minimally displaced fracture in the right medial orbital wall.
Well, listen, I didn't continue. I'll tell you why I didn't continue. Because I'm not a dummy. Like, I'm not going to go out there and fight one of the best strikers in the world if I can't see.
With double vision.
With any eye. Look, I know, as an MMA fighter, look, things are going to happen in the fight that compromise you.
The backlash from UFC 3 to 1 left the promotion backed into a corner with no clean solution in sight. Aspinall's first defense as the undisputed heavyweight king ended in chaos after Gaines' double eye poke triggered severe orbital damage and resulted in Brown syndrome. Aspinall made the only rational call he could, protecting his eyesight rather than forcing himself to fight blind. But the decision immediately drew heat from fans and was made even worse by Dana White's sharp post-fight remarks. Although the medical scans later proved without question just how serious the injury was, White's early comments had already shaped a damaging public narrative around the champion. The idea that Tom didn't want to keep going quickly turned into ammunition for critics and casual observers, who began to question whether Aspinall possessed the grit expected of a heavyweight title holder. The hit to his reputation was immediate, and it was profound.
When do you think you can start training again?
Look, it's not up to me. It's up to the doctors. At the minute, I ain't allowed to do nothing, so I'm just following advice at the moment.
What's next?
What's next for me right now is there's talk of...
Then, during his November 30th interview, Dana White tried to calm the growing storm of criticism. He stated, "No one is blaming Aspinall for being unable to continue after the eye poke." He went on to emphasize the need for harsher consequences for illegal eye pokes and insisted that running back Aspinall versus Gaines was the #1 priority, ideally as soon as early 2026, assuming Aspinall received medical clearance. But this is where the real issue becomes impossible to ignore. That promise depended entirely on having a champion who was physically capable of returning to action, something that was far from guaranteed given the severity of Aspinall's injuries.
Well, look, if you were sidelined from doing your job for like 15 months, not allowed to do anything, you train your off for 6 months for a fight, then to get double eye poked, to be left with no vision for nearly 6 weeks because of an illegal move. How do you think I feel? I'm not feeling fantastic, am I?
Then in a November 30th interview, Dana White tried to calm the growing storm surrounding the situation. He said, "Nobody is blaming Aspinall for not being able to continue after taking an eye poke." He went on to push for harsher penalties for fouls like this and emphasized that the UFC intended to run back Aspinall versus Gane as soon as the champion was medically cleared, possibly sometime in early 2026. But this is where the real issue lies. That entire plan depended on Aspinall actually being healthy enough to fight again, and Tom Aspinall, the reigning champion, had no clear return date whatsoever. The possibility of surgery looming over him cast a massive shadow across his recovery timeline. The heavyweight division, the UFC's flagship attraction, was once again stuck in complete standstill. Only this time, it wasn't John Jones's negotiations, layoffs, or contract delays holding everything hostage. It was a severe injury from an illegal foul that happened right inside the UFC's own cage. When you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, a troubling pattern becomes painfully obvious. This saga is just the latest chapter in Dana White's long, rocky history with his top-tier heavyweights, and it raises pointed questions about how the promotion handles its most elite fighters. Stipe Miocic, the winningest heavyweight champion ever, repeatedly voiced how unappreciated he felt despite his historic resume. Francis Ngannou, arguably the most devastating puncher the sport has ever seen, left the organization entirely following bitter disagreements over pay and respect. And now Tom Aspinall, one of the most skilled and dedicated champions on the roster, found himself locked in a conflict with the UFC president that seemed nearly impossible to fix. Veteran referee Herb Dean later explained that during the commission's post-fight review sessions, there was a rising push for much stricter rules on eye pokes. New proposals included immediate point deductions for fingers extended toward the face and far tighter guidelines for referees on how to enforce those infractions. But while committees debated rule changes and media outlets dissected every angle, Aspinall remained on the sidelines, his reign frozen, his future uncertain. Then on November 23, 2025, Dana White publicly blasted Aspinall for suggesting he might vacate the belt if Sergey Pavlovich were granted a title opportunity, calling Aspinall's stance insane. The tension between the promotion and its heavyweight champion was rising rapidly, each side becoming more entrenched with every passing week. By November 30th, Aspinall responded forcefully to his critics, reminding everyone that no fighter is obligated to continue a bout after being illegally gouged in both eyes. Being the victim of a foul, he argued, should never mean sacrificing your long-term vision just to appease public perception or satisfy the promotion's schedule. This entire ordeal has blasted a glaring spotlight onto the UFC's long-standing, deeply flawed approach to managing fighter relations. The promotion is lightning fast when it comes to building up its rising stars, pouring hype on champions like Aspinall while they're climbing toward the top. But when those same fighters suffer severe injuries or need real organizational backing, the support suddenly becomes slow, inconsistent, or downright absent. It mirrors countless past controversies and may finally force the UFC to adopt overdue rule reforms. Still, the most urgent question looming over everything was simple. What would become of the heavyweight championship? It's absolutely crucial to understand that the UFC, meaning Dana White, the matchmakers, and the ownership group, possesses full contractual authority to strip a champion if he is unable or unwilling to compete for an extended period. This isn't some hypothetical clause buried in legal language. The organization has exercised this power repeatedly. Conor McGregor had belts taken. Georges St. Pierre was relieved of his title. Tony Ferguson saw his interim championship vanish. The precedent is firmly established and has impacted some of the biggest icons this sport has ever produced. With the heavyweight division at a complete standstill, no clear medical timetable for Aspinall's return, and the champion openly pushing back against the promotion and its president, the ingredients for a seismic decision were all in place. Every sign pointed toward a breaking point. It was no longer a matter of whether Dana White would take action, but how soon. The UFC could not allow its marquee weight class to remain frozen for an indefinite stretch, especially when the reigning champion was facing injuries that might very well require serious surgical intervention. The tension had reached a critical mass, and the entire MMA world braced itself for the fallout.
Obviously, you've been a massive help to the UFC. You've taken a fight on 2 weeks' notice. You've taken a fight in the middle of the night, been backup fighter for Jones versus Miocic, and then obviously the whole John Jones saga. How do you sort of see this going forward for yourself with the UFC?
I think right now we just got to focus on the health, innit?
As everything unfolded, the pressure around Tom Aspinall began tightening from every possible angle. His devastating injury left him completely unable to compete. His working relationship with Dana White had broken down to the point of no return, and the heavyweight division itself was now demanding forward movement that simply could not be postponed any further. By December 3, 2025, UFC CEO Dana White still had not issued any public response to Tom Aspinall's recent statements, where the champion expressed deep frustration with White's handling of the eye poke incident at UFC 3. That silence highlighted just how severe the communication breakdown had become, and it was the clearest warning yet of what was about to follow. White's previous comments from late November dealt only with the broader issue of eye pokes and the hypothetical rematch, never truly addressing Aspinall's personal criticism. No fresh interviews emerged. No posts online. No new comments at presses. Nothing from White surfaced in the days after Aspinall's explosive remarks. It was obvious that any retaliation from the UFC president wasn't going to come in the form of a speech. It was going to arrive as a decisive, uncompromising action, and backlash surged across social media, with countless supporters calling out White for seemingly putting profits and spectacle above the basic well-being of one of his own champions. Aspinall's loyal fanbase demanded answers, questioning how the reigning heavyweight king could be treated with such little acknowledgement. Still, behind the scenes, Dana White was preparing his move. And when it came, it wouldn't be gentle. It would be absolute. The UFC has a long history of removing belts from champions who remain inactive for extended periods or who decline to compete. And now Tom Aspinall found himself directly in the center of that harsh reality. Look at the situation from Dana White's strictly business-driven point of view. Aspinall held the interim belt for well over a year without unifying it, during which time the entire heavyweight landscape remained stalled. And after finally becoming the official undisputed champion, his very first defense ended in a no contest after barely a round of action. Now he faced an uncertain medical recovery that could stretch out indefinitely. The division, which had already been frozen for ages during the John Jones turmoil, was about to be stuck again, possibly for even longer. With no return date in sight, that Aspinall's Brown syndrome could very well need surgery, pushing his comeback even further away. Even though he was cleared for extremely light activity, his main priority was, and had to be, restoring full vision. There was absolutely no guarantee he would ever reclaim the same dominant form he once displayed. The injury threatened his career in a very real way, and no expert could predict how long true healing would require. From a strictly operational standpoint, the UFC needed a functioning heavyweight champion immediately. Pay-per-view business demanded it. Fans demanded it. Broadcasters demanded it. And Dana White built his entire organization by delivering exactly what the market asked for.
I've said hello here and there, but I don't really have a relationship with Dana. I have a relationship with, I speak to Hunter.
You're the heavyweight champion of the world. You're a huge star. You've taken fights on short notice. You've been backup fighter. You stayed on the sidelines for etc., etc., etc.
The champion, Tom Aspinall, stayed entirely committed to rebuilding his health, while the promotion remained laser-focused on business realities. And those two priorities were on a direct collision course that would end in the most dramatic and damaging way imaginable. Although Dana White stated that the UFC would take care of Aspinall's medical expenses, all communication came through Hunter Campbell. Not once did White personally reach out. Any financial or logistical support flowed through intermediaries, never from the president himself. White had initially promised that the rematch with Gane would be booked as soon as possible, ideally in the early months of 2026, once Aspinall was medically cleared. But early 2026 was closing in fast, and Aspinall showed absolutely no indication that he'd be ready to fight. The comments White made at the post-fight press conference now looked disastrous in hindsight. His insistence that both guys are not injured was proven wildly inaccurate, especially after Aspinall released his extensive medical records. Public reaction became sharply divided. Many fans praised Aspinall for protecting his long-term health and making the sensible decision. Others accuse him of damaging the heavyweight division's reputation by not forcing himself to continue. Henry Cejudo tore into Dana White on December 3, 2025, saying, "Everyone needs to grow up, including Dana White." His outburst tied directly into Aspinall's situation, pointing to it as a perfect example of the chaos currently plaguing the sport. Jon Jones had previously been reprimanded for delays that were entirely self-inflicted, contract standoffs, scheduling problems, and repeated changes of plans. If Jones could face consequences for issues he brought upon himself, then what consequences awaited a champion who openly challenged the UFC president, contradicted his public statements, and could not provide any clear timeline for a return to action?
That's fine. If you get punched or kicked in the eye, that's fine. If you get double eye poked in both eyes and you've got no vision because of a foul, why should I carry on? So some dummy can look and say, "Oh yeah, Tom just got knocked out," because I ain't going to fight if I can't see anything because of a foul. If it's an illegal move, we have to fight through it. That's what we do as fighters. But when it's a foul, why am I going to put my health at risk when I can't see at all?